Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Zainab Ashraf and today I'm going to discuss the very first chapter of our class 9th history textbook, that is the French Revolution. So in this video lecture, I'll be covering the following topics. French society during the late 18th century, the struggle to survive, a growing middle class envisaged an end to privilege. So basically, I will be throwing a light on the French society before the French Revolution that ultimately led to the outbreak of the revolution. So let's begin. So before the French Revolution, there existed kingdoms in Europe. It is the French Revolution that gave us the idea of, or we can say that gave us the concept of one person, one vote, and one value. So basically, it is the French Revolution that has given the world the ideas of French, one person, one vote, and one value. Today, we all take these ideas as for granted. But if we look back into the history, then we may find that these have a lot of history behind them. So on 14th July 1789, there was an alarming situation in the capital city of France, that is Paris. Basically, there was a rumor spreaded over the country that the king Louis XVI had ordered his troops to march towards the capital city of France, which means Paris, to fire indiscriminately upon the citizens. So, in reaction to this, about 7,000 people, including both men and women, formed a national assembly, which was known as militia. They were in search of arms and broke out a number of government buildings. A group of several hundred people marched towards eastern part of the country and stormed into the fortress prison that was Bastille. Then they demolished it and killed the commander of Bastille. In addition to this, they released the prisoners. There were only 7 of them, and they released their prisoners. And then after this incident, the people of France, people of Paris, kept these fragments of prison as a memory of its destruction, as the Bastille prison was hated by all because it stood for the despotic power of the king. So now we will throw light on the French society before the French Revolution. In 1774, Louis XVI, who was the 16th ruler of the Bourbon family, ascended the throne of France. Upon his accession, he found an empty treasury. The reasons why he found an empty treasury were like long years of war had drained the financial resources of France. In addition to this, there was a cost of maintaining court at the immense palace of Versailles. And talking about Louis XVI, then under Louis XVI, France had helped 13 countries, 13 American colonies in gaining independence from its common enemy, that was Great Britain. Due to this, a billion livres of debt got added up, which had already risen to more than 2 livres. In addition, 10% interest on loan was charged by moneylenders to the state. So before the French Revolution, moneylenders paid, gave loans to the state, and they have to pay interest. And now moneylenders begin to charge 10% interest to the state on the loans. So this was also a reason for the empty treasury in France. In addition to this, there was a cost of maintaining an army, running court, running government offices, and other universities. Due to all this, the state or the government, or we can say the Louis XVI, was forced to increase taxes. Now this was not all about the French society. The French society was divided into 3 estates before the French Revolution, that is clergy, nobility, and the third estate, which included big businessmen, merchants, peasants, artisans, etc. Now what happened? Only members of the third estate had to pay taxes. Peasants made up of 90% of the population, and they owned only 40% of the land, while 60% of the land was owned by either nobles or church or other richer members of the third estate. The first 2 groups, means the clergy and nobility, enjoyed certain privileges by birth. Some of them I will discuss some of them, like the exemption from paying taxes, the feudal privileges, and the taxes that they extracted from the peasants. There were various taxes. Now, here I would be discussing only three of them. Firstly, I would be discussing the tithes. Tithes were the taxes that were extracted by the church from the peasants, which comprises one third of the agricultural produce. Talking about the tally was a tax which was paid by the third estate directly to the state. And at last, there was another tax that was paid by the third estate, that was paid indirectly on the exemption on the articles of everyday use like salt and tobacco. Now I'll be discussing the struggle to survive. Like, what were the circumstances with the people? What were the conditions that the people were facing? The shortage of food grains they were facing. So, population of France in 1715 was 23 million, but in 1789 it rose to 28 million. The production of food grains could not keep pace with the demand, with the increasing demand of population. Due to this, price of bread rose rapidly, due to which wages could not keep pace with the rise in prices, as already there were low wages given to the workers. So now as the prices rose, so wages could not keep pace with the rise in prices. Now, what will happen? The poorest can no longer buy bread, which will ultimately widen the gap between the rich and the poor. Now, this all will lead to the subsistence crisis. And it led to the subsistence crisis in France. So, in the past, peasants and workers revolt against increasing taxes and food scarcity. There were certain emergence of social groups, namely middle class. Now, how the middle class gained wealth? They gained wealth through overseas trade and manufacture of goods such as woolen and silk. The third estate included professionals, lawyers, administrative officials. All these believed that no group should be privileged by birth. Rather, a person's social merit, a person's social position must depend on his merit. These ideas led to the these ideas led to the emergence of freedom, equal laws, equal opportunities for all. And these ideas, these philosophy was put forth by philosophers like John Locke, Jean Rousseau, and Montesquieu. Talking about the John Locke, so John Locke, in his two treatises of government, he sought to refute the doctrine of divine and absolute power of monarch. So clearly, we can see that he sought to refuse the absolute power of monarch. He sought to, refuse the, we can say, the uncontrollable, the unlimited power that was enjoyed by the monarch. Talking about another philosopher, that was Jean Rousseau. So he proposed a government based on social contract between people and its representatives. He wanted a government that was based on a social contract between people and its representatives. Talking about the Montesquieu, so what he did, he wrote The Spirit of the Laws. It was a book that was written by Montesquieu, and in this book he wanted a division. He wrote about division of power within the government between legislature, executive, and judiciary. This model was put into force in the USA, and it was a sample for political thinkers in France. Ideas of these philosophers were discussed in salons or coffee houses. These separate among people through books and newspapers. Now, at last, we will be discussing the outbreak of the revolution. So, in France, the monarch did not have the power to impose taxes according to their own will. For this, he had to call a meeting of the Estates General to increase taxes. Now, what was this Estates General? It was a body, it was a political body to which the three estates sent their representatives, and they decided there whether we have to increase the taxes or not. The monarch alone could decide when to call a meeting. The last time it was called in 1614. And on 5 May 1789, Louis XVI called an assembly of the States General to pass new taxes in a hall of Versailles. First and second estate sent 300 representatives each, while the third estate sent 600 representatives who were, probably more rich and educated members. Peasants and women, or we can say the artisans or other classes of the society or other backward people, these were not allowed to enter the assembly. However, their demands were listed in 4000 in 4000 letters, in 40,000 letters that were brought by their representatives. Now voting being conducting was always being conducted on the principle that is one state one vote. That is all if there were three states and each state would have only one vote. This time too, king was determined to continue the same practice, but the members of the third estate disagreed. They demanded one member one vote. They rejected king's proposal. They rejected king's demand, king's old practice. They wanted that voting to be done now from now on the principle of one member one vote, where each member in a state would have one vote. But the king rejected this proposal, due to which members of the third estate walked out of the assembly in protest. On 20 June, they declared themselves a national assembly, and they said that until and unless we won't draft a constitution, we won't be we won't be resting, we won't stop. And why they wanted to draft a constitution? They wanted to draft a constitution just to limit the powers of monarch and to guarantee the rights of each citizen. And they were held by Mirabeau and Abbassies. Mirabeau was originally from a noble family, but he too was determined to, we can say, to do away with the society of feudal privilege. He brought out a number of pamphlets, he brought out a number of journals as well, and he delivered powerful speech to the crowds assembled at Versailles. Talking about another priest who was originally a priest, Abbassies, he wrote an influential pamphlet, namely Third Estate. What is the Third Estate? And they, held the National Assembly. Bad harvest means bad production of grains, and due to which the price of bread rose. Breakers exploited the situation and hoarded supplies. In the countryside, rumors spread from village to village that the lords of the manor had hired bands of brigands who were on their way to destroy the ripe crops. Caught in a frenzy of fear, peasants in several districts seized hoes and pitchforks and attacked Chatiox. Basically, this Chatiox was a castle or stately residence belonging to a king or a noble man of that time. They looted hoarded grain and burned down documents containing records of manorial dues. A large number of nobles fled from their homes, many of them migrating to neighboring countries. Faced with the fear of, we can say the power of his revolting subjects, Louis XVI finally accorded recognition to the National Assembly and accepted the principle that his powers would from now on be checked by a constitution. On the night of 4 August 1789, the Assembly passed a decree abolishing the feudal system of obligations and taxes. Also, the members of the clergy, we can say the first state, too were forced to give up their privileges. As a result, the government acquired assets worth at least 2 billion livres.